Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western literary canon out loud. Today we are continuing in The Well at the World's End, a tale by William Morris. We are in Book 2, Chapter 16, entitled Of the Tales of the Swevenham. And with that said, I'll get started. Old Richard was no worse than his word, and failed not to find old acquaintance of Swevenham in the Saturday's market, and Ralph saw naught of him till midweek afterwards. And he was sitting in the chamber of the hostel when Richard came in to him. Forsooth Blaise had bidden him come dwell in his fair house, but Ralph would not, deeming that he might be hindered in his quest, and be less free to go whereso he would, if he were dwelling with one who was so great with the magnets as was Blaise. Now Ralph was reading in a book when Richard came in, but he stood up and greeted him, and Richard said smiling, "What have you found in the book, lord?" Said Ralph, "It telleth of the deeds of Alexander." "Is there aught concerning the Well at the World's End therein?" said Richard. "I have not found aught thereof as yet," said Ralph, "but the book tells concerning the Dry Tree, and of the kings sitting in their chairs in the mountains near by." "Well then," said Richard, "maybe thou wilt think me the better tale-teller." "Tell on then," quoth Ralph. So they went and sat them down in a window, and Richard said, "When I came to Swevenham with two old men that I had known young, the folk made much of me, and made my good cheer, whereof were long to tell thee. But to speak shortly, I drew the talk round to the matter that we would wot of. For we spake of the men of the Dry Tree, and an old man began to say, as Master Clement the other day, that this name of theirs was but a token and an amory which those champions have taken from the tree itself, which Alexander the champion saw on his wayfarings. And he said that this tree was on the hither side of the mountains called the Wall of the World, and no great way from the last of the towns whereto Clement will wend. For Clement told me the name thereof, to wit, Goldburg. Then another and an older man, one that I remember a stout carle ere I left Swevenham, said that this was not so, but that the tree was on the further side of the Wall of the World, and that he who could lay his hand on the bowl thereof was like enough to drink of the well at the world's end. Thereafter enough spake, and told a tale of how the champions at Hampton first took the Dry Tree for a token, and he said that a rumour ran that a woman had brought the tidings thereof to those valiant men, and had fixed the name upon them, though wherefore none knew. So the talk went on. But there was a carline sitting in the ingle, and she knew me, and I knew her, and indeed in days past, when I was restless and longing to depart, she might have held me at Swevenham, for she was one of the friends that I loved there. A word and a kiss had done it, or maybe the kiss without the word. But if I had the word, I had not kiss of her. Well, when the talk began to fall, she spake and said to me, "Now it is somewhat strange that the talk must needs fall on this seeking of that which shall not be found, whereas it was but the month before thou wert last at Swevenham that Wat Miller and Simon Bower set off to seek the Well at the World's End, and took with them Alice of Queenau, whom Simon loved as well might be, and Wat somewhat more than well. Mindest thou not? There are more than I alive that remember it." "Yea," said I remember it well. For indeed the foster son, these were the very three of whom I told thee, though I told thee not their names. "Well," said I, "how sped they? Came they back, or any of them?" "Nay," she said, "that were scarce to be looked for." Said I, "Have any other to thy knowledge gone on this said quest?" "Yea," she said, "I will tell thee all about it, and then there will be an end of the story, for none knoweth better thereof than I. First, there was that old man, the wizard, to whom folk from Swevenham and other places about were used to seek for his lore and hidden matters. And some months after these three had departed, folk who went to his abode amongst the mountains found him not. And soon the word was about that he also, for as feeble as he was, had gone to seek the well at the world's end, though mayhappen it was not so. Then the next spring after thy departure, Richard comes home Arnold Wright from the wars, and asks after Alice. And when he heard what had befallen, he took a scrip with a little meat for the road, lays his spear on the shoulder, and is gone seeking the lost. And the thing which they found not, that I deem was the end of him. Again, the years after that, as I deem, 3 of our carles fell in with 2 knights riding east from Whitwall, and were questioned of them concerning the road to the said well, and doubted not but they were on that quest. Furthermore, and some you wot this well enough, and more belike know it not, 2 of our young men were faring by night, and cloud on some errand, good or bad, it matters not, on the highway 30 miles east of Whitwall. It was after harvest, and the stubble fields lay on either side of the way, and the moon was behind thin clouds, so that it was light on the way, as they told me. And they saw a woman wending before them afoot. And as they came up with her, the moon ran out, and they saw that the woman was fair, and that about her neck was a chaplet of gems, and shone in the moon. And they had a longing both for the jewel and the woman. But before they had laid hand on her, they asked her of whence and whither, and she said, From ruin and wrack to the well at the world's end. And therewith turned on them with a naked sword in her hand, so that they shrank from before her. Hearken once more. The next year came a knight to Swevenham, and guested in this same house. And he sat just where sitteth yon yellow-headed swain, and the talk went on the same road as it hath gone tonight. I told him all the tales as I had said it in now, and he asked many questions, but most of the lady with pair of beads. And on the morrow he departed, and we saw him not again. Then she was silent, but the young man at whom she had pointed blushed red and stared at her wide-eyed, but said no word. But I spake, Well, dame, but have none else gone from Swevenham, or what hath befallen them? She said, Hearken yet. 20 years agone, a great sickness lay heavy upon us and the folk of Whitwall. And when it was at its worst, 5 of our young men, calling to mind all the tales concerning the well at the world's end, went their ways to seek it, and swore that back they would never, save they found it, and could bear its water to the folk of Swevenham. And I suppose that they kept their oath, for we saw not either of the water or of them. Well, I deem that this is the last I have to tell thee, Richard, concerning this matter, and now is come the time for thee to tell tales of thyself. Thus for that time dropped the talk of the well at the world's end, Lord Ralph, and of the way thither. But I hung about the township yet a while, and yesterday as I stood on the stone bridge and looked on the water, up comes that long lad with yellow hair that the dame had pointed at, and says to me, Master Richard, saving thine age and thy dignity and mastery, I can join an end to the tale which the carline began on Sunday night. Yea, forsooth, said I, and how, my lad? Said he, Thou hast a goodly knife there in thy girdle, give it to me, and I will tell thee. Yea, quoth I, if thy tale be knife-worthy. Well, the end of it was that he told me thus, that by night and moon he came on one riding the highway, just about where the other woman had seen, whose tale he had heard of. He deemed at first this rider to be a man, or a lad rather for smallness and slenderness, but coming close up, he found it was a woman, and saw on her neck a chaplet of gems, and deemed it no great feat to take it of her. But he asked her of whence and whither, and she answered, From unrest to the well at the world's end. Then, when he put out his hand to her, he saw a great anlace gleaming in her hand, wherefore he forbore her, and this was but 5 days ago. So I gave the lad my knife, and deemed there would be little else to hear in Swevenham for this bout, and at least I heard no more tales to tell I came this morning, so there is my poke turned inside out for thee. But this word further would I say to thee, that I have seen on thy neck also a pair of beads exceedingly goodly. Tell me now whence they came. From my gossip, Dame Catherine, said Ralph. And it seems to me now, though at the time I heeded the gift little, save for its kindness, that she thought something great might go with it, and there was a monk at Higham on the way who sorely longed to have it of me. Well, said Richard, that may well come to pass, that it shall lead thee to the well at the world's end. But as to the tales of Swevenham, what deemest thou of them? Said Ralph, What are they, save a token that folk believes that there is such a thing on the earth as the well? Yet I have made up my mind already that I would do so if I trode in it, so I am no nearer to it than erst. Now is there not for it to save abide Master Clement's coming, and when he hath brought me to Goldburg, then I shall see how clearly a quest looks by the daylight of that same city. He spake so cheerfully that Richard looked at him askance, wondering what was toward with him, and if mayhappen anything lay underneath those words of his. But in his heart Ralph was thinking of that last tale of the woman whom the young man had met such a little while ago, and it seemed to him that she must have been in Whitwall when he first came there, and he scarce knew whether he were very sorry or not that he had missed her. For though it seemed to him that it would be little more than mere grief and pain, nay, that it would be wicked and evil to be led to the well at the world's end by any other than her who was to have brought him there, yet he longed, or thought he longed, to speak with her concerning that love of his heart, so early rewarded, so speedily beggared. For indeed he doubted not that said woman was the damsel of Burton Abbas, whose image had named herself Dorothea to him in that dream. Chapter 17. Richard bringeth tidings of departing. Fell the talk between them at the time, and 3 days wore. And on the morning of the 4th day came Richard to Ralph, and said to him, Foster son, I am sorry for the word I must say, but Clement Chapman came within the gates this morning early, and the company with which he was riding are bound for the road, and will depart at noon today, so that there are but 4 hours wherein we twain may be together. And thereafter, whatso may betide thee, it well be, that I shall see thy face no more. So what thou wilt tell me must be told straightway. And now I will say this to thee, that of all things I were fain to ride with thee, but I may not, because it is Blaise whom I am bound to serve in all ways. And I deem moreover that trouble's time may be at hand here in Whitwall, for there is an Earl hight Walter in the Black, a fair young man outwardly, but false at heart and a tyrant. And he had some occasion against the good town, and it was looked for that he would send his herald here to defy the port more than a half-moon ago. But about that time he was hurt in a fray, as we hear, and may not back a horse in battle yet. Albeit Fristed is not forgotten, as saith the saw, and when he is whole again we may look for him at our gates. And whereas Blaise knows me for a deft man at arms, or something more, it is not to be looked for that he will give me to thee for this quest. Nay, of thee also it will be looked for that thou shouldest do knightly service to the port, and even so Blaise means it to be. Therefore I have lied to him on thy behalf, and bidden Clement also to lie, which forsooth he may do better than I, since he wotteth not wholly whither thou art minded. I have said thou wouldest go with Clement no further than Cheaping Knowe, which lieth closer to the further side of these mountains, and will be back again in somewhat more than half-moon's wearing, so now thou art warned hereof. Ralph was moved by these words of Richard, and he spake, Forsooth, old friend, I am sorry to depart from thee. Though I shall presently be all alone amongst aliens, yet now is manhood rising again in me, for so that cause at least shall I be glad to be on the way. And as a token that I am more whole than I was, I will now tell thee the tale of my grief, if thou wilt hearken to it, which the other day I might not tell thee. I will hearken it gladly, said Richard. And therewith they sat down in a window, for they were within doors of the hostel, and Ralph told all that had befallen him as plainly and shortly as he might. And when he had done, Richard said, Thou hast had much adventure in a short space, lord, and if thou mightest now refrain thy longing for that which is gone, and set it on that which is to come, thou mayest yet harden into a famous knight and a happy man. Said Ralph, Yea, now tell me all thy thought. Said Richard, My thought is that this lady who was slain was scarce wholly of the race of Adam, but that at the least there was some blending in her of the blood of the Fays, or how deemest thou? I wot not, said Ralph sadly. To me she seemed but a woman, though she were fairer and wiser than other women. Said Richard, Well, furthermore, if I heard thee aright, there is another woman in the tale who is also fairer and wiser than other women. I would she were my sister, said Ralph. Yea, quoth Richard, and dost thou bear in mind what she was like? I mean the fashion of her body? Yea, verily, said Ralph. Again, said Richard, doth it seem to thee as if the Lady of the Dry Tree had some inkling that thou shouldest happen upon this other woman? Whereas she showed her of the road to the well at the world's end, and gave her that pair of beads, and meant that thou also shouldest go thither. And thou sayest that she praised her beauty and wisdom. In what wise did she praise her? How came the words forth from her? Was it sweetly? Like honey and roses for sweetness, said Ralph. Yea, said Richard, and she might have praised her in such wise that the words had came forth like gall and vinegar. Now I will tell thee of my thought, since we be at point of sundering, that thou take it amiss and be wroth with me. To wit, that thou wouldest have lost the love of this lady as time wore, even had she not been slain, and she being of no fay, yet wiser than other women, and foreseeing, knew that so it would be. Ralph brake in. Nay, nay, it is not so, it is not so. Hearken, youngling, quoth Richard, I deem that it was thus. Her love for thee was so kind that she would have had thee happy after the sundering. Therefore she was minded that thou shouldest find the damsel, who as I deem loveth thee, and that thou shouldest love her truly. Oh, nay, nay, said Ralph, all this guess of thine is naught, saying that she was kind indeed, even as heaven is kind to them who have died martyrs, and enter into its bliss after many torments. And therewith he fell a-weeping at the very thought of her great kindness, for indeed to this young man she seemed great, and exalted far above him. Richard looked at him a while, and then said, Now I pray thee be not wroth with me for the word I have spoken, but something more shall I say, which shall like thee better. To wit, when I came back from Swevenham on Wednesday, I deemed it most like that the well at the world's end was a tale, a coloured cloud only, or that at most it were indeed on the earth, that thou shouldest never find it. But now is my mind changed by the hearing of thy tale, and I deem both that the well verily is, and that thou thyself shalt find it, and that the wise lady knew this, and that the greater store by thy youth and goodliness as a richer and more glorious gift than it had been, were it as fleeting as such things mostly be. Now of this matter will I say no more, but I think that the words that I have said, and which now seem so vain to thee, shall come into thy mind on some later day, and avail thee somewhat. And that is why I have spoken them. But this again is another word, that I have got a right good horse for thee, and other gear such as thou mayest need for the road, and that Clement's fellowship will meet in Petergate hard by the church, and I will be thy squire till thou comest thither, and ridest thence out of the gates. Now I suppose that thou wilt want to bid Blaise farewell, yet thou must look at it that he will not deem thy farewell of great moment, since he swimmeth in florins and goodly wares, and moreover deemeth that thou wilt soon be back here. Nevertheless, said Ralph, I must needs cast my arms about my own mother's son before I depart. So go we now, as all this talk hath worn away more than an hour of those 4 that were left to me. Chapter 18. Ralph departeth from Whitwall with the fellowship of Clement Chapman. Therewith they went together to Blaise's house, and when Blaise saw them, he said, Well, Ralph, so thou must needs work at a little more idling before thou fallest to in earnest. Forsooth, I deem that when thou comest back, thou wilt find that we have cut thee out a goodly piece of work for thy sewing. For the good town is gathered a gallant host of men, and we shall look to thee to do well in the hard hand play, whenso that befalleth. But now come and look at my house within, how fair it is, and thou wilt see that thou wilt have somewhat to fight for, whereas I am. Therewith he led them up a stair into the great chamber, which was all newly dight and hung with rich arras of the story of Hercules. And there was a goodly cupboard of silver vessel and some gold, and the cupboard was of 5 shelves, as what but meet for a king's son. So Ralph praised all, but was wishful to depart, for his heart was sore, and he blamed himself in a manner that he must needs lie to his brother. But Blaise brought them to the upper chamber, and showed them the goodly beds with their cloths and hangings, and all was as fair as might be. Then Blaise bade bring wine, and made them drink. And he gave Ralph a purse of gold and an anlance very fair of fashion, and brought him to the door thereafter. And Ralph cast his arms about him, and kissed him, and strained him to his breast. But Blaise was somewhat moved thereat, and said to him, Why, lad, thou art sorry to depart from me for a little while, and what would it be, were it for long? But ever wert thou a kind and tender-hearted youngling, and we twain are all alone in an alien land. Forsooth, I wot that thou hast, as it were, embraced the Upmeads kindred, father, mother, and all, and good is that. So now God and the saints keep thee, and bear in mind the hosting of the good town, and the raising of the banner that shall be no great while. Fare thee well, lad. So they parted, and Ralph went back to the hostel, and gathered his stuff together. He laid it on a sumpter horse, and armed him, and went to the Petergate to join himself to that company. There he found the chapmen, 5 of them in all, and their lads, and a score of men-at-arms, with whom was Clement, not clad like a merchant, but weaponed, and bearing a coat of proof, and a bright sally on his head. They greeted each other, and Ralph said, Yea, Master Clement, and we be riding to battle? Maybe, quoth Clement. This way is long, and our goods worth the lifting, and there are some rough places that we must needs pass through. But if ye like not the journey, abide here in this town, the onset of Walter the Black. Therewith he laughed, and Ralph, understanding the jape, laughed also, and said, Well, Master Clement, but tell me, who be these that we shall meet? Yea, and I will tell thee the whole tale of them, said Clement, but abide till we are without the gates. I am a busy man enow, for all is ready for the road, save what I must do. So now bid thy Upmeads squire farewell, and then to horse with thee. So Ralph cast his arms about Richard, and kissed him, and said, This is also a farewell to the house where I was born and bred. And as he spake, the thought of the house and garden, and the pleasant fields of Upmeads came into his heart so bitter-sweet, that it mingled with his sorrow, and well-nigh made him weep. But as for Richard, he forbore words, for he was sad at heart for the sundering. Then he gat to horse, and the whole company of them bestirred them, and they rode out a gates. And Master Clement it was that ordered them, riding up and down along the array. But Ralph fell to speech with the chapmen and men-at-arms, and both of these were very courteous with him, for they rejoiced in his company, and especially the chapmen, who were somewhat timorous of the perils of the road. Chapter 19. Master Clement tells Ralph concerning the lands whereunto they were riding. When they were gotten a mile or 2 from Whitwall, and all was going smoothly, Clement came up to Ralph and rode at his left hand. He then fell to speech with him and said, Now, Lord, will I tell thee more concerning our journey, and the folk that we are like to meet upon the road, and of the perils whatso they may be, I told thee not before, because I knew thee desirous of seeking adventures eastway, and knew that my tales would not hinder thee. Yea, said Ralph, and had not this goodly fellowship been, I had gone alone, or with any carle that I could have lightly hired. Clement laughed and said, Fair sir, thou wouldst have failed of hiring any one man to go with thee eastward a many miles, for with less than a score of men well armed, the dagger of death or captivity is over great, if ye ride the mountain ways up to the Cheaping Knowe. Yea, and even if a poor man who hath nothing win that way alone, he may well fare among thieves, and be stolen himself body and bones, for lack of anything better to steal. Hereat Ralph felt his heart rise, and when he thought of battle and strife, and he made his horse to spring somewhat, and then he said, It liketh me well, dear friend, that I ride not with thee for naught, but that I may learn my daily bread like another. Yea, said Clement, looking on him kindly, I deem of all thy brethren that thou hast the biggest share of the blood of Red Robert, who first won Upmeads. And now thou shalt know that this town of Whitwall that lieth behind us is the last of the lands we shall come to wherein folk can any courtesy, or are ruled by the customs of the manor, or by due lawful earls and kings, or the laws of the lineage or the port, or have any guilds for their guiding and helping. And though these folks whereunto we shall come are, some of them, Christian men by name, and have amongst them priests and religious, yet are they wild men of manners, and many heathen customs abide amongst them, as swearing on the altars of devils, and eating horse flesh at the high tides, and spell-raising more than enough, and such like things, even to the reddening of the doom rings, with the blood of men and of women, yea, and of babes. From such things their priests cannot withhold them. As for their towns that we shall come to, I say not but we shall find crafts among them, and worthy good men therein. But they have little might against the tyrants who reign over the towns, and who are of no great kindred, nor of blood better than other folk, but merely masterful and wise, who have gained their place by cunning and the high hand. Thou shalt see castles and fair strong houses about the countryside, but the great men who dwell therein are not the natural kinds of lords of the land, yielding service to earls, dukes, and kings, and having under them vassors and villains, men of the manor. But their tillers and shepherds and workmen and servants be mere thralls, whom they may sell at any market, like their horses or oxen. Forsooth, these great men have with them for the more part free men waged for their service, who will not hold their hands from aught that their master biddeth, nor staying to ask if it be lawful or unlawful, and that the more because whoso is free man there, house and head, must he hold on the tenure of bow and sword, and his life is like to be short if he hath not sworn himself to the service of some tyrant of a castle or a town. Yea, Master Clement, said Ralph, these be no peaceful lands whereunto thou art bringing us, or very pleasant to dwell in. Little for peace, but much for profit, said Clement, for these lands be fruitful of wine and oil and wheat, and neat for sheep. Withal metals and gems are dug up out of the mountains. And on the other hand, they make but little by craftsmanship, wherefore are they the eager for chaffers with us merchants. Whereas also there are many of them well able to pay for what they lack, if not in money, then in kind, which in a way is better. Yea, it is a goodly land for merchants. But I am no merchant, said Ralph. So it is, said Clement, yet thou desireth something, and whither we are wending thou mayest hear tidings that shall please thee, or tidings that shall please me. To say sooth, these two well may be adverse to each other, for I would not have thee hear so much of tidings that shall lead thee on, but rather I would that thee return with me, and not throw thy young life away. For indeed I have an inkling of what thou seekest, and meseems that death and the devil shall be thy faring fellows. Ralph held his peace, and Clement said in a cheerfuller voice, Moreover, there shall be strange and goodly things to see, and the men of these parts be mostly goodly of body, and the women goodlier yet, as we carles deem. Ralph sighed and answered not at once, but presently he said, Master Clement, canst thou give me the order of our goings for these next days? Yea, certes, said Clement. In 3 days' time we shall come to the entry of the mountains. 2 days thence we shall go without coming under any roof, save of the naked heavens. The day thereafter we shall come to the mid-mountain house, which is as it were an hostelry. But it was built and is upheld by the folks that dwell anigh, amongst whom be the folk of Cheaping Knowe. And that house is hallowed unto truce, and no man smiteth another therein. So that we oft come on the mountain strong thieves there, and there we be blithe together, and feast together in good fellowship. But when there be foemen in that house together, each man or each fellowship departing hath grace of an hour before his foemen follow. Such are the customs of that house, and no man breaketh them ever. But when we depart thence, we shall ride all day, and sleep amidst the mountains. And if we be not beset that night or the morrow's morn thereof, safe and unfoughten shall we come to Cheaping Knowe. Doth that suffice thee, as at this time? Yea, master, quoth Ralph. So therewith their talk dropped for the moment. But Clement talked much with Ralph that day, and honored him much, as did all that company. Chapter 20. They come to the mid-mountain guest-house. On that night they slept in their tents, which they had pitched on the field of a little thorp beside a water, and there they had meat and drink and all things as they needed them. And in likewise it befell them the next day. But the third evening they set up their tents on a little hillside by a road which led into a deep pass, even the entry of the mountains, a road which went betwixt exceeding high walls of rock. For the mountain sides went up steep from the plain. There they kept a good watch and ward, and naught befell them to tell of. The next morning they entered the pass, and rode through it up to the heaths. Then rode they all day by wild and stony ways, and came at even to a grassy valley, watered by a little stream, where they guested, watching their camp well, and again none meddled with them. As they were departing the next morn, Ralph asked of Clement if he yet looked for onset from the waylayers. Said Clement, "It is most like, lord, for we be rich prey, and it is but seldom that such a company rideth this road. And albeit that the wild men know not to a day when we shall pass through their country, yet they know the time within of 24 hours or so. For we may not hide our journey from all men's hearing, and when the ear heareth, the tongue waggeth. But art thou anxious concerning this matter, son?" "Yea," said Ralph, "for I would fain look on these miscreants." "It is like that ye shall see them," said Clement, "but I shall look on it as a token that they are about waylaying us, if we come upon none but the mountain house. For they will be fearful lest their purpose leak out from unwary lips." Ralph wondered how it would be, and what might come of it, and rode on, pondering much. The road was rough that day, and they went not above a foot pace the more part of the time. And day long they were going up, and it grew cold as the sun got low, though it was yet summer. At last, at the top of a long stony ridge, which lay beneath a great spreading mountain, on the crest whereof the snow lay in plenty, Ralph saw a house, long and low, builded of great stones, both walls and roof. At sight thereof the men of the fellowship shouted for joy, and hastened on, and Clement spurred up the stony slopes all he might. But Ralph rode slowly, since he had naught to see, to save himself, so that he was presently left alone. Then he looked aside, and saw something bright-hued, lying under a big stone, where the last rays of the sun just caught some corner of it. So he went thither, deeming that mayhappen one of the company had dropped something, pouch or clout, or what not, in his haste and hurry. He got off his horse to pick it up, and when he had laid hand on it, found it to be a hand's breadth of fine green cloth embroidered with flowers. He held it in his hand a while, wondering where he could have seen such like before, that it should smite a pang into his heart. And suddenly it called to mind the little hall at Burton Abbas, with the oaken benches and the rust-strewn floor, and this same flower-broidered green cloth dancing about the naked feet of a fair damsel, as she moved nimbly hither and thither, dighting him his bever. But his thoughts stayed not there, but carried him into the days when he was abiding in desire of the love that he won at last, and lost so speedily. But as he stood pondering, he heard Clement shouting to him from the garth gate of that house. So he leapt on his horse, and rode up the slope into the garth, and lighted down by Clement, who fell to chiding him for tarrying. Clement said, "There is peril in loitering outside this garth alone, for those sons of the rope often lurk hard by for what they may easily pick up, and they be brisk and nimble lads." "What ailed thee?" said Ralph. "I stayed to look at a flower which called Upmeads to my mind." "Yea, lad, yea," quoth Clement, "and art thou so soft as that? But come thou into the house. It is as I deemed it might be. Besides the house-warden and his wife, there is no soul therein. Thou shalt yet look on McHingman's sons, as thou desirest." So they went into the house, and men had all that they might need. The warden was an old hoar man, and his wife well stricken in years. And after supper was talk of this and that, and it fell much, as was like to be on those strong thieves, And Clement asked the warden what he had seen of them of late. The old carle answered, Nay, Master Clement, much according to wont. A few beevies driven into our garth, a pack or two brought into the hall, and whiles one or two of them coming hither with empty hands for a sleep and a bellyful, and again a captive led in on the road to the market. Forsooth, it is now a good few days ago, 3 of them brought in a woman as goodly as mine eyes have ever seen. She sat on the bench yonder, and seemed to heed little that she was a captive, and had shackles on her feet after the custom of these men, though indeed her hands were unbound, so that she might eat her meat. And the carle thief told me that he took her but a little way from the garth, and that she made a stout defence with a sword before they might take her, but being taken she made but little of it. Would he do her any hurt? Said Ralph. Nay, surely, said the carle. Doth a man make a hole in a piece of cloth which he is taking to market? Nay, he was courteous to her after his fashion, and bade us give her the best of all we had. What like was she? Said Ralph. Said the carle, She was somewhat tall, if I am to note such matters, grey-eyed and brown-haired, and great abundance of it. Her lips very red, her cheeks tanned with the sun, but in such wise that her own white and red shone through the sun's painting, so that her face was as sweet as the best wheat-ear in a 10-acre field when the season hath been good. Her hands were not like those of a demoiselle, who hath sitteth into a chamber to be looked at, but brown as of one who hath borne the sickle in the sun. But when she stretched out her hand so that the wrist of her came forth from her sleeve, it was as white as milk. Well, my man, said the carline, thou hast a good memory for an old and outworn carle. Why dost thou not tell the young knight what she was clad withal, since, save for their raiment, all women of an age are much alike? Nay, do thou do it, said the carle. She was even as fair as I have said, so that there be few like her. Said the dame, Well, there is not so much to be said for her raiment. Her gown was green, of fine cloth enough, but not very new. Welts of needlework had it on it, and a wreath of needlework flowers round the hem of the skirt, but a cantle was torn off from it, and the scuffle which was taken, I suppose, so that it was somewhat ragged in one place. Furthermore, she had been looking at Ralph as she spoke, and now she broke off suddenly and said, still looking at him hard, Well, it is strange. What is strange? Said Clement. Oh, naught, said the dame, save that the folk should make so much to do about this matter, when there are so many coming and going about the mid-house of the mountains. But Ralph noted that she was staring at him even after she had let the talk drop. Waned the even, and folk began to go bedward, so that the hall grew thin of guests. Then came up the carline to Ralph, and took him aside into a nook, and said to him, Young knight, now will I tell thee what seemed to me strange and now, to wit, that the captive damsel should be bearing a necklace about her neck, as like to thine as one lamb is to another. But I thought thou mightest be a lever, that I spake it not openly before all the other folk, so I held my peace. Dame, said he, I thank thee. Forsooth, I fear sorely that this damsel is my sister, for ever we have worn the same like pair of beads. And as for me, I have come hither to find her, and evil will be it if I find her enthralled, and it may be past redemption. And therewith he gave her a piece of the gold money of Upmeads. Yea, said she, poor youth, that will be sooth indeed, for thou art somewhat like unto her, yet far goodlier. But I grieve for thee, and know not what thou wilt do, whereas by this time most like she has been sold and bought, and is dwelling in some lord's strong house, some tyrant that needeth not money, and will not pay his prey to go for a prayer. Here, take thou the gold again, for thou mayest well need it. Let me share a lock of thy golden hair, and I shall be well apaid for thy keeping silence concerning thy love. For I deem that it is even so, and that she is not thy sister. Else hadst thou stayed at home, and prayed for her with book, and priest, and altar, and not gone seeking her a weary way. Ralph reddened, but said naught, and he let her put scissors amongst his curly locks, and take what of them she would. And then he went to his bed and pondered these matters somewhat, and said to himself that it was by this damsel's means that he should find the Well at the World's End. Yet he said also that, whether it were so or not, he was bound to seek her and deliver her from thraldom, since he had kissed her so sweetly and friendly like a brother for the sweetness and kindness of her before he had fallen into love that had brought him such joy and such grief. And therewith he took out that piece of her gown from his pouch, and it seemed dear to him, but it made him think sadly of what grief or pain she might even then be bearing, so that he longed to deliver her, and that longing was sweet to him. In such thoughts he fell asleep. This is the end of chapters 16 through 20 of Book 2 of The Well at the World's End, a tale by William Morris. In the next video, we will proceed to chapter 21, entitled A Battle in the Mountains. Thank you for listening.